Welcome back. I'm Audrey Rinlisbacher, author of The Mission Driven Life and founder of The Mission Driven Mom. Today is a really special treat talking to James Lindsay. He's unbelievably credentialed and popular and has done so much good to help us understand our culture. Before we get into that interview, I want you to know that if you're new to this podcast, I would recommend that you keep up with the current episodes, but also head back to the beginning and listen to some of those first podcasts. You'll get a deep dive into the 7 laws of life mission, which is what everything we do here hovers around that framework and those laws and principles. And then you'll also hear a lot of mission-driven stories of great men and women who have lived those laws and had huge positive impact in the world. I also want to encourage you to go get your free copy of the audiobook of The Mission Driven Life. Discover and fulfill your unique contribution to the world over at themissiondrivenmom.com. You can grab that. It won't be available forever, so make sure that you head over there to get your free copy of that. And if this podcast is of benefit to you, please leave a review and pass it on. That helps us share the word about truth and principles. This interview with James Lindsay was incredible. We talked all about what critical race theory is, why it matters to us as parents. He gave some really good advice to parents and what they should be doing with their children right now. We talked about truth and reality and the natural law. We talked about his story and experience of becoming the man that he's become and why he does what he does. So enjoy this interview with James Lindsay. All right, welcome back to the podcast. We have an incredible treat today. I don't know how it happened, but James Lindsay has graciously agreed to talk to me today and to share some of his incredible wisdom and scholarship that is so needed in the world. I'm going to give you a little bit of his professional bio, some of my takes on who he is, why I listen to him, why I trust him, and then we'll get into some of his experiences with some questions. So first of all, I know you, American-born author, mathematician, you got your PhD from the University of Tennessee in mathematics, and that's incredible. So I don't even know the level of intelligence that's required to do that. On his bio, it says professional troublemaker, which is actually true. He's written 6 books spanning a range of subjects, including religion, philosophy of science, postmodern theory. He's a leading expert on critical race theory, and I have learned a lot from him on that, and that leads him to reject it completely. The founder of New Discourses, and we got to meet in person when I went to his event just a few weeks ago here in Dallas. It was phenomenal. Encourage anyone and everyone to attend, and then there's future opportunities. And you've got a book going right now, Cynical Theories, How Activist Scholarship Made Everything About Race, Gender, and Identity, and Why This Harms Everybody. And that one's getting translated in 15 languages. Is that one already out,
Yeah,
James?
that
That
one
one's
came out
available?
actually, and that came out. That's actually, I don't know why it's worded that way. I know I just pointed you. So
Yeah.
just mea culpa. I just told you, go read the bio that's a little bit dated on my website
Yeah.
because I'm very like weird about writing my own bios.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, that the book came out in the summer of 2020. It was my
Oh,
kind of
okay.
first major book about woke stuff, and it is now in 30 languages, and it's sold 500,000 copies. So it's the entry point, especially if I leave the country, that is the book people know me for. Like I was in New Zealand and people
Yeah.
were bringing it up to sign. I went to Belgium and people brought it to me. And I haven't even seen most of the foreign language copies. They have different covers. They're
That's
completely different.
awesome.
And
That's the
like
one I
people are
need to
bringing
read, I
up
think.
copies of it that I've never seen when foreign languages having me sign it. And so it's all over the world. It's exciting. But yeah, I
That's
think it's
so
like 30
awesome.
languages now.
That's awesome. That's the one I need to grab then. I've been consuming all of that information from you via podcast and interviews and things like that. That would be great to grab. I just have the Marxification of Education is the one I've got. And then of
Well,
course you've been on all the podcasts, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, all the people. I don't even know what the list is or all the people, but
I've
everybody
been on
knows
like
you.
every
And
podcast,
yeah, I think yeah, I was
everyone.
so amazed and grateful for you to come today. What I can say from my own personal experience with Dr. Lindsay is that I don't even remember when I first stumbled across you. It's probably been 2 or 3 years. I don't know if it was from an interview that I saw or my sister sent it to me, but my sister and I have been exchanging, and another girlfriend, yeah, here's another Lindsay podcast, and we exchange them when we discuss them, which has been awesome. But one of the reasons why I was immediately like on board, I guess, with what you talk about is because I didn't even know about classical liberal education. I had no experience with ancient philosophy or any of that until I was married and had a couple kids. I found it inadvertently in a small liberal arts college that was nearby. And luckily, I signed up and made it all the way through a master's degree. And so I have the very introductory rudiments of an okay, decent education. It's how I feel about it. I'm grateful for it. But what that meant was that when you used certain references and you talked about certain people, I knew what you were talking about. And I feel really blessed because I feel like that gave me an edge. That helped me know you knew what you were talking about. Because there's so many names that people could drop. And if you had no frame of reference for when they lived, who they were, what their worldview was, any of that, it would be hard to know. That's a real legitimate problem in the current culture. How do I even know who to listen to? Because I don't even know. But I especially had become very fascinated with communism and Marxism and had read and studied much about what went on in especially Russia, especially China. And so I knew when you got in, especially the Marxist stuff was, oh my gosh, so good and really spoke to me. And I was like, and then you saw, helped me see layers of it that I hadn't seen before. And so I know you do your homework. I know you know what you're talking about because my education luckily gave me enough information to be able to identify that. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Grateful for all the things that you've taught me so far, what you've keyed me into, what I should be aware of, how to understand the culture a little bit better. Postmodernism was just a nut I couldn't crack for so long. I would read books on it. I would try to read the guys, try to read, and it's so hard. So I'm so grateful for some hand holding where stuff like that is concerned. I mentioned to you before we got on, we've got 3 levels in our academy. That third level is a very high level introduction to just there are these worldviews and these are some key things they teach. And postmodernism is in there. Anyway, so that's why I wanted to talk to you. That's why I wanted you on this podcast. That's why I think you're an important voice in the culture and hope that all of the listeners to our show will get more involved in what you do, read your books, watch your stuff. Let's begin at the beginning and talk about you before the storm began. I know you got this PhD. We were talking for a minute about some of the reasons that you didn't pursue all the way into academia and working there, but give us a little bit more about why you did leave academia after that degree and why you were frustrated with what was going on in academia, and then segue into how you got started doing what you do now. I know that there's article submissions. I've seen watched you talk about all of that stuff. And I bet a lot of our listeners don't know about that. So tell us that story.
So this story can be very long. My history doesn't make sense except when you've lived it, and then it all makes sense. It just was the natural thing to do. Like you said, I got a PhD in math.
Yeah.
I finished that in 2010. I have a bachelor's degree in physics. My master's is in math in between.
Mm.
And so I introduced that. So I was in college effectively from fall of 1997 until spring of 2010,
Mm-hmm.
which is a long time to be in college. And all of it was either physics, which is a hard, pure science, or mathematics, which is like, in some sense, even more rarefied in some sense. And I bring that up because the time frame ending in 2010, 97 to 2010, and then the subject matter, I just want people to understand, like, I did not deal with woke in college. Like, I get that it was
Mm.
probably happening in the humanities departments. I know it
Sure.
was happening in the education departments, and I was too busy looking down my nose at every other department, regardless, because every physicist looks down at every other department, including mathematicians, and every mathematician looks down at every other department, including physicists. And the only people who look down on both math and physics are philosophers and possibly engineers who think nobody's practical. I had no exposure. A lot of people go to college, and so they know you have to take all these classes, then you have your major. They don't know what grad school's like a lot of
Yeah.
times unless they've been. Your entire school is your major. There is
Yeah.
no other class. Like people talk to me all the time, oh, wow, when were you at UT? And I tell them the years, and they're like, wow, did you know so and so in the history department? I'm like, that's not in the math building.
Yeah.
I literally only went to other buildings when for some reason there wasn't enough room in the math building to have the class
Yeah.
that was a math class anyway.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I ever left the building. My entire University of Tennessee experience could really be summarized as being one building. So I say that because it's all immersive. Woke wasn't a thing. So a lot of people think, wow, James, I get this. Sometimes I just don't try to correct people. It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
But people are like, James saw the woke coming early. No, I didn't. I just saw university bureaucracy, is what I saw.
Yeah.
I saw the softening of standards to keep students in and paying tuition, and I didn't want to be a part of it. I had the faculty meetings where they were instructing us in the classes below a certain level that are not within a math major or a science major, just pass people, find ways, give them extra credit, make it easier, do whatever you have
Wow.
to do. At one point, they said that if you want to fail more than one student, you need to be able to justify why. Come bring evidence to the dean. And I
That's
was
like no
like,
scoring Little League.
yeah. And I get it because
Everyone
it
gets
was
a
like,
trophy.
it was for the math class that only people who will do zero more math ever in anything they do, it's that class.
Yeah.
But it's so it doesn't, it's literally like the university just waving the white flag and saying, we know it's pointless to make you study math when you're not going to do it. But I objected to this kind of on a principled level. Like I had to learn US history, which I didn't have that much. I'm glad I learned it now, but at the time, 18, 19 years old, I'm like, I'm a physics major. Why the hell do I have to learn history? I don't want to learn that. I had to
Yeah.
suffer through that. I had to do, you can suck it up and pass a math class, kids. You're getting
Yeah.
a college degree, right?
Yeah.
You can show some mathematical reasoning.
It
Maybe
should
you should be
mean
able to
something.
add fractions or something.
Yep.
And so, anyways, it was the bureaucracy and this tendency. I didn't know the what it was at the time, but it was before I started taking on the woke stuff that I realized it was that the guiding principle of the university had become student retention. The goal was just to keep
Oh.
paying customers in the door. And I was sickened by this and I didn't want to continue. As we were talking about before we started, my family was such that my stepkids were about to start high school when I graduated, and it would have been like, hey kids, who wants to get dragged all over the country to go
Yeah.
to a bunch of different high schools because I have to do postdocs and
Yep.
nobody wants that. And that was a little bit more to tip me over the edge. So I left the university after I finished my PhD. I didn't look back. To this day, people sometimes ask me if I would consider being a teacher in an institution again. And I'm like, nope. Absolutely not. The bureaucracy is a disaster. The whole system is corrupt. I don't want, it's not corrupt in some like dirty political corruption way necessarily. It's just gross. I don't want any part of this. Like this, if the university is not geared toward basically making like academic ninjas, like I'm not interested. Like I want high level stuff here. I think I have these controversial opinions that our society lied to our young people. Most people should not go to college. They should have done other things. It was not the
Mm-hmm.
guarantor of a good job. We ended
Yeah.
up with this. It sometimes was it Peter Turchin, is that his name, who called it elite overproduction? We have all
Yeah.
these basically uppity people who got degrees who can't go work like a normal job now because they're too good for that, but they're not actually skilled to fit anywhere in the economy. Either
Yeah.
they have a useless skill like gender studies, or they have an oversaturated skill like veterinary medicine, which nothing wrong with veterinary medicine, especially if you want to work on large animals. But currently, last I heard, vet schools are producing 11 times more vets than the economy can absorb.
Oh, wow.
So you can just imagine what the problem is there, right? And
Yeah.
there's all kinds of interesting conversations we could have about should academic advising at university, should they be on the hook? What are good ways to put them on the hook for misadvising students into bad sectors of the economy, basically? But that's a different discussion. I decided to get out of this at any
Yeah.
rate. So I leave the university and I had to figure out something to do.
Yeah.
And my wife was a massage therapist. This is a weird story. James, you were a massage therapist from 2010 to 2020, of all things, with a PhD in math. Yes,
Yep.
I was. And there are actually, it's like my story doesn't make any sense unless you lived it. I can say my wife was a massage therapist, which is true, and encouraged me to join the business with her and take some of her overflow and then build my own clientele. And we'd have something going on, and I could work here with her in the studio or whatever. Cool. That's a thing, but I had some elite overproduction there. I'm like, I have a PhD. Like, what? Massage
Yeah.
school?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
But for the fact that I used to be a fighter, I still can, but I used to like actually get in like rings and fight, right?
Oh,
And so
wow.
I trained martial arts for a long time. I used to
Uh-huh.
fight in like real competitions and things. And one day when I was in my early 20s, I was at, so before the PhD, I
Yeah.
was at the dojo or whatever training, and I hurt my back really bad. Like my
Mm.
back went all the way out, as they say. And
Wow.
this sets up this cycle of like doomsday. You get it back in alignment or whatever, you start training again. Yep, you hurt it again 3, 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Sometimes it gets in like a lot worse, whatever. So I had this long-term chronic back pain and kind of disability that actually was pulling, I was functionally able. I'm not claiming I was disabled or anything, but practicing martial arts at a high level, continuing to do competitive martial arts was out. Like that
Yeah.
wasn't real anymore. And it's like I just had this stupid back pain. As it turns out, while I was doing my PhD, I happened to be out at the park, out on a walk, and I ran into a guy. This is a stupid story, but he thought I was my brother. They had gone to school together, blah, blah, blah. And he was a
Oh my gosh.
chiropractor. And he could
Uh-huh.
tell by my posture that my back hurt, but he thought he was this guy he was friends with in high school, even though it's mistaken identity by brother. We got talking. I'm like, no, I'm his brother. We hung out anyway a little bit, chatted for a bit. He's like, I can tell your back hurts. Do you want me to fix it? And he did a massage to me, not twist and crack my back. And I was like,
Yeah.
weird. And he's like, you need to go buy this book. It's called The Trigger Point Therapy Workbook by Claire and Amber Davies.
Hmm.
It's in its third edition. People ask me every time I tell the story, where is the book? Well, I told you the whole title. You can go look it up. And it's on Amazon.
Uh-huh.
And massage yourself according to where it says to poke. And you now know what it feels like. And I'll help you here and there if you have time or we have time or whatever. And we'll straighten you out. And a few months later, I'd figured it out and I'd worked out a technique and had fixed my own back. So
Wow.
I get out of this back pain that had been plaguing me for most of a decade. My life is vastly improved.
Yeah.
I have this skill, which I actually do to family members and friends and things. No money involved because that is illegal. And so I already had this background in helping people and helping myself. And I had this technique that I knew was rare within the massage market because I'd been a
Yeah.
massage therapist who couldn't do it. And
Yeah.
even after I learned it, there was like stuff it's hard to reach. And I'm like, can you do this? And I'm like on the table telling the massage therapist how to massage me correctly to make the thing work. And I'm like, no, seriously, just put your elbow there and hold it. No, harder. And this is frustrating. Why don't I just take my wife's advice and do this? So I did that for 10
Mm.
years.
Yeah.
And while I'm doing that, I'm academically bored. I have some
Yeah.
free time. It is a busy job, but your fingers can only handle so much. So
Mm.
you're not like at the desk 60 hours a week or
Right.
something.
Right.
So I start writing and getting involved in discussion forums and things online. People were wrong on the internet. One thing leads to another. I learned that radical feminists are a particular branch of wrong on the internet. I start fighting with them. They're terrible. I start reading their academic literature to understand what in the heck they're talking about because I had no idea how they can just be calling everybody a sexist and saying misogyny is the enforcer of sexism. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's Kate Mann, if you wonder who that is. She wrote a book called Down Girl, no like weird sexual undertones there, about misogyny being the enforcer of systemic sexism. And I'm like, all right. So I'm reading all this and I'm finally kind of get my head around it. I'm friends with this guy, Peter Boghossian. We've written a bunch of stuff together at this point, and some of it is literally about all this kind of woke stuff at that point, which was poisoning everything we were dealing with.
So
It
you're
was
just
killing his
publishing
work.
articles online, you mean?
Yeah, just
That's
like,
what's happening?
Time Magazine, Scientific
I
American,
see.
here
Uh-huh.
and there. We had
Uh-huh.
the big ambition to get into the Atlantic or the New York Times.
Oh, cool.
I think we eventually actually, he and I put out a book together later, and we actually did get an essay in the New York Times
Yeah, I
as a
saw
result
that.
of it. I forgot about that. So, anyways, we never got the Atlantic though, and now it's whack, so that's okay. But we were just doing that, and everything was toxic as hell because of these feminists. And Pete worked at Portland State University, which is maybe not ground zero, but ground like 0.001 or something for woke. It's like really close to as bad as
Mm.
it can get. They got rated
Wow.
on the top 10 worst schools for free speech. And so Pete went to the president of the university and said, did you know that we're on the top 10 list for worst schools? And the president's reply was, who wrote the list? Because sometimes those are lists you want to be on,
Yeah.
like totally politicized.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And it's a
Yeah.
civil rights group called FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, that had made the list. It's pretty unbiased
Oh.
in that assessment. It's just
Uh-huh.
straight civil liberties. And
Yeah.
so, anyways, we decided to take this on. As you intimated, what we
Yeah.
decided to do was write a bunch of academic hoax articles That's called the Grievance Studies Affair. That was my big introduction
Yeah.
into public life.
Hmm.
We wrote 21, actually, if you count the trial balloon. We wrote 20 primarily articles, academic peer-reviewed journal articles
Were you just
for.
trying to go as far as, were you just going to keep going until you were found out, or did you have a
No,
number you were
no.
trying to
We
get
were going
to?
to write novel papers for 1 year from when
Oh,
we started, and then we were
okay.
going to see the papers that we wrote through, and then that was that. And
Okay.
so that was the original plan,
Right.
which you formulated in August of 2017. And
Right.
so the last novel paper we wrote was in June of 2018. And we
Hmm.
stopped in June because number one, we hit 20. Number two, things were getting complicated. Papers were getting published. It was in the news, like stuff's happening. We're trying to keep up with literally like 14 papers or 12 papers or something are active at this point, is getting to be out
Wow.
of control. So we
Wow.
decided 20 was the number. 10 months is enough, and we stopped.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the goal was 1 year to write from August to August, come up with new ideas, and
Yeah.
then see them through, which can take another year. But we ended up getting caught all of that attention. Some of the papers got, one of the papers in particular, which is the infamous one about dog humping at dog parks being an indicator for rape culture. They're all funny, as it turns out. That paper was so absurd. Eventually, the Wall Street Journal started digging into it, and we were caught, basically.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
we had to send in like driver's licenses to prove that we were the fake name that we used to write the paper. And
Mm.
so we weren't going to do that. And so we had to just figure out how to get out of this thing as best as possible.
So they
So
know that they're fake, but they aren't sure who you are yet?
no, no, they thought the paper was real, and then the Wall
Oh,
Street Journal thought the paper was fake, or something's wrong, like that the
right.
identity, like nobody could find the identity of the alleged author.
Right, right,
And
right.
so the academic journal, in this case, which was called Gender, Place, and Culture, which is the leading journal in feminist geography,
Uh-huh.
and said basically these right-wing trolls won't leave us alone. Please just prove your identity so we can clear this up, because they're demanding proof of your
Oh.
identity. And I'm not who you think I am. So
Yeah.
like
This isn't what you think it is.
Helen Wilson. So actually, it's funny. I talked to the lady from the Wall Street Journal. Her name's Jillian K. Melchior. And so I got on the phone with her. I think she still writes there. I don't know. But I got on the phone with her. And so she hears my voice. And I was like, this is Helen Wilson. And she's like, are you trans? I was like, no, this is a lot more interesting than that.
Ugh.
And off we go having our dialogue. That thing comes out. In the midst of this, though, I realized this woke stuff's not stupid and it's not funny, that it's actually scary. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, the wheels are coming off the bus of society with this.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, I concluded that woke in the universities represented, and I got in so much trouble for this phrasing. I still get in trouble for this phrasing, but I'm still going to say it again because I stand by it. Woke in the universities represents the seed, and I say that with emphasis, the seed of a genocide. And I say it with emphasis because if you say the seed of a genocide, people hear genocide. I didn't say it is a genocide. I said it is the
Yeah.
seed, which if it finds soil and it
Yeah.
sprouts and it's
Yeah.
nourished
Yeah.
and it grows and it finally bears fruit, is a
Yeah.
genocide. It is the seed of a genocide. And
But there's
so
no question that woke is intentionally turning people against each other. I don't think
there
that's
was in
ridiculous.
2018.
Yeah, I don't think it's ridiculous to say that's where it could go.
Nobody
We not
believed
all watch Rwanda for heaven's sake? Like we
nobody
know,
believed a word of it in
that's
2018.
you're intentionally turning people against each other. You're
They did
intentionally
not
creating
get it.
contention. You're intentionally creating hate. Like
The
you want
belief,
people to not like each other. You want people to distance themselves from others. Like
that's,
it wasn't
that's
like
what I
that.
saw.
Yeah,
But
that's what
the
this
belief in
does.
2018 was not that. The belief was this is a bunch of college people being college people, and the real world will straighten them out, leave it alone. And
Mm.
I was like, no, it's not. This is a big, big, big problem coming. So I
The
braved.
reason it can't be that is because it's coming from the leadership. It can't be college people doing college stuff if they believe that the authorities are with them.
Yeah,
That's the difference is when
yeah.
if the authorities are with us, then this is legit and they'll bring it into their adult life and expect people to mold themselves to it.
Which was called the Long March through the Institutions. And that's
Yeah.
what they were doing. And
Yeah.
not in 2018, nobody believed that. Peter and I were considered quite wild. I finally
Yeah.
had this conversation with a guy, a doctor in 2019. Peter was there too. and we're talking to this guy who's fascinated by what we've been doing. And the first person we ever heard say, it finally hit me one day that, the believe that they're going to go out into the real world and the real world's going to straighten them out. And it suddenly hit me, no, they're going to go out and change the real world.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what their goal was. It's what they say their goal is. So I asked my wife in January of 2018 if I could quit my job as a massage therapist eventually when it got to be too much and dedicate all of my effort and resources to fighting woke by figuring the role that I selected for myself. I'm not showing up to a lot of policy fights. I have been to school board meetings, but I'm not like the guy I'm not running like a protest or community
Right.
organizing. I decided that I have a skill in reading this, understanding it, making sense of it, and communicating that to people. So I decided that I was going to step into the role of Rosetta Stone for woke. And
Mm,
that's what I can do. I can help other people decode this. So a lot of
yeah.
people think that my discussions at a high level, that the podcast is hard. What I mostly do is read primary sources to people and tell them what they
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
But the fact is, I always saw myself as if I'm going to be the Rosetta Stone, I've got to put the cookies on the fourth shelf and I've got to put not the very top shelf, but the one right below it. And I've got to bring a ladder. And so that's what I try to do. So people are like, James, dumb it down. I'm like, nope, your job.
No.
I
Yeah.
bring the ladder, the cookies are there, you get the cookies, you distribute them. That's the way that I've envisioned my role. That's what I've sought to do. I think I do it well. When I try to
Yeah.
dumb it down, I have to ask Grok for help. I'm not very good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Grok actually does an okay job with it, but then I take
Yeah.
the thing Grok gives me and then I edit it and make it hard again so it's correct. And there's just something wrong with me, the math in me, I don't know. And at any rate,
I think that the obstacle a lot of the time isn't so much that you can't explain the concepts. I think a big part of the barrier for most people is just the language. Like math is a different language.
yeah,
It's a different language.
this is a
And there's
different
a lot
language.
of concepts and a lot of definitions and a lot of words that people just,
Thousands,
yeah, they just don't.
thousands.
And so it's really, it can feel like or sound like speaking a different language. And you have to get in there and acquaint yourself with that and be able to. And again, like I said, I had a little bit of a leg up maybe on other people to a point simply because I was lucky enough to submerge myself in some of that education. But I think
And
it's
I'll
a
give
big
you a
barrier.
taste of this that's
And you
very
have to
helpful.
use that language. You can't not
You have to.
use it. You have, what are you going to do?
So,
That's
like in
what just delivered.
postmodernism, which you mentioned, which is a very mysterious and complicated thing, they focus on this kind of a thing called discourses. By the way, that's part of the reason I named my company New Discourses.
I didn't make that
But
connection.
at any rate, the discourses, what are discourses? Well, in general, it's how things are talked about, how people talk about things
Uh-huh.
and what they're talking about. But they mean something more specific. And I'm about to do something very dangerous. I'm about to try to use words to describe a complicated picture, which never goes well. And I do
Uh-huh.
not have the picture to share with you because I don't remember where I saw it. But I had watched this YouTube video some years ago and it was describing discourses.
Hmm.
And it basically looked like a big complicated mathematical graph, like a spiderweb graph,
Okay.
except in 3 dimensions and big and complicated. And
Hmm.
every dot represents a word, and every line between the dots represents how that word relates to other words. And it was all just, and
Wow.
it wasn't a real map of language. It was just a pictorial representation of an idea they were trying to communicate. Dog would have a line that goes to cat under the idea of that they're animals or whatever, right? So that it was like thousands of dots. It was a very complicated, spectrally looking thing.
Yeah.
And what it showed was the dots with all the lines. And then it said that set of lines is the discourses or the
Right.
discourse. That's
Right.
how things are talked about. And all the
Right.
things you can talk about are the words, and the connections between them are the discourse. On the video, they got rid of those lines and kept all the same dots, and you could tell that's what they did. And then they just put new lines. And they're like, that's a different discourse. So the point that I want to make is when you say it's a
Mm.
different language, it's actually a different discourse. They're using a lot of specialist terminology, but they're also using a lot of your regular words
Yes.
with different connections
Yes.
between the words
Yes.
so that when you
Yes.
hear the words, you don't realize they fully mean
Yes.
something different.
Yes. And
And
you
what
think you know what they mean and you actually don't. And then when their conclusions are so confusing to you, then you feel like you're just an idiot because why doesn't it make sense to you?
And so what the difference is, and it took me a long time to figure this out, and I can actually say it succinctly now, but what I did to understand that language was, believe it or not, I just started writing a dictionary of it. and it's
What?
partly done. There's like 200 entries that I finished and like 500 that I haven't done on new discourses. I called it Translations from the Wokish. And I just created a
Hmm.
social justice encyclopedia where I just went through their words and tried to explain to other people what they must mean by that word. And what I boiled down from this, first of all, it's how I really got my head around how they think, was by
Yeah.
decoding as many other words as possible. And so, like, in our normal use of language, the discourses are actually defined by something, which is that the words are supposed to refer to things in reality.
Yeah.
So the
It
idea is that
helps.
the words correspond to real things, and the
Hmm.
relations between the words are defined by real relationships between the words.
Yeah.
That is not how they order their discourses. It took me so long to figure this out. The North Star for us
Mm.
is reality.
Yeah.
The North Star for them is political power. So all of their words have
Hmm.
to be understood in how they create relations of power between
Hmm.
the, if you have two dots that are connected, that dot that's connected, or the line that's connecting them, defines a power relationship
Yeah.
in some way or another. So every single word has to somehow have an explanation that boils down to their convoluted ideas of systemic power. And until I figured that out, it was literally, it's like trying to learn Korean where you can't read their
Wow.
alphabet.
And isn't that the same reason why you make so many connections, draw so many straight lines back to Marxism? For the same
Mhm.
reason, that's the same, because they've got the same ultimate goal in mind. That's that connection, that political power is what's driving it, is what makes them all similar and what draws a line to them back to Marxism.
Yeah, that in every single possible trail of citations.
Yeah.
The other
Yeah.
thing that I did was I started reading this stuff. I was trying to figure out feminism. Then we were trying to write the grievance papers. And then I was trying to make sense of this to communicate it. And it's like peeling an onion in a sense. And
Yeah.
it's just instead of reading the history of this particular branch of philosophy from the beginning and moving forward, oh, here's Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and here's what Kant did with him, and here's what Hegel did with
Yeah.
that. And now we get to Marx through Feuerbach. Instead of that, I started on the other end. I started at the end. I started in pop articles in Cosmopolitan. And then
Uh-huh.
it's who's the feminist they referenced? What did she say? Who did she cite?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're back to Foucault. Here's all these
Mm-hmm.
postmodernists. But
Mm-hmm.
somehow
Mm-hmm.
there's this other piece that I can't find. And the citation trail gets a little bit wacky, but they all talk about Marx here and there, but they seem to be against Marx. And then somehow, actually, my friend Mike O'Fallon, I was with him and I'm talking about, I was just postmodernism at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Back in 2019, we were in a
Yeah.
hotel together in Orlando. And he's, you need to read Repressive Tolerance by Herbert Marcuse. And I'm like, never heard of it. Not relevant. Is it postmodern? No, not relevant. In fact, it's critical theory, which we had been convinced by a critical theorist that understood postmodernism, who was helping us understand it at the time, that critical theory wasn't relevant, which is completely wrong. I don't know if it's a lie or just a complete distortion. I can work out arguments for both
Yeah.
as to how he could have made this argument honestly or not. But at any rate, Mike sends me a link to Repressive Tolerance. I end up going to my room and just sitting there a little early in the hotel, don't have anything to do, start reading it. Takes about an hour and a half to read the thing all the way top to bottom for yourself. It's
Mhm.
not easy.
Yeah.
And I'm reading it and I'm like, holy crap, this is like everything. But then we're busy for the rest of the trip, like 2, 3 days. And on the
Mm-hmm.
flight home, I read all of it. I actually get
Mm-hmm.
to the bottom, and the bottom is where he takes the mask off. It's this is going to require censorship and pre-censorship, and violence is on the table, and all that. I'm like, holy
Wow.
moly! And I was like, we live in this guy's world. This is the world they created. And all of a sudden, I knew that critical theory was relevant. And the second I knew critical theory was relevant, that's neo-Marxism.
Yeah.
Therefore, Marxism's on the table. And then I had this weird, humiliating moment because up to that point, I had been arguing against Jordan Peterson's characterization of it as being postmodern neo-Marxism. And I was
Oh.
like, that's a lot of words. And I was against the neo-Marxist element. Then I read Marcuse and I'm like, it's neo-Marxism that's using postmodern tools. It's postmodern neo-Marxism. Crap. And it's like Jordan
Mm-hmm.
was right.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't getting through to me, but he was right. So at any rate, I was able to go back and listen to Jordan again with a new set of ears and a new set of eyes and started to piece it together. But once you find them, it's a straight line to Marx. There's no
Yeah.
avoiding it. And then
Yeah.
you can start to see the Marx, the postmodernists hit it better, but you can see the Marx all through how they think. And these newer people, it's all kinds of all over the place there.
Yeah.
But they do this citation game where they won't cite the like really bad guy they don't want you to know they worked with, but they use all of his ideas. They just attribute it to somebody else who also used their ideas. There's this weird citation game. It's like they know they're hiding their tracks sometimes. And it takes
Wow.
somebody like Paulo Freire, who I dove into heavily for education, for me
Hmm.
to really open my eyes and be like, this guy's citing like Stalin
Wow.
all the way out. What's going on?
Wow.
No, these guys are just commies and they've just changed their shirts. It's otherwise they're literally just
Wow.
communists. And now we saw in the news the other day, just to draw a metaphor, that Xi Jinping changed his shirt back. So he took off his business suit and put on the frog collar Mao military
Mm.
suit for his meeting that he had with Putin and Kim Jong-un the other day.
Wow. I did not know that.
Hmm. The world
Okay.
noticed.
Just as a sideline, as a quick question, then we'll get back to the mainline questions. This is just my own bit of curiosity. So, would you say that critical race theory has developed into what we might call its own worldview, or would you say it's like a tool set that can get layered on other approaches? Is it?
Both. It's
Oh, okay.
both.
Okay.
It's both, but I thought you were going to ask me a different question. I was anticipating your question. I was like, is it that or is it Marxism? And I'm
Oh,
like, but it's just derivative to Marxism. It's
yeah.
literally Marxism just reconceptualized, but it
Yeah.
is its own worldview, right? So you have a massive
What I'm
social
thinking.
system of white supremacy that pervades everything that was created by white people. And the
Yeah.
point was, in order to elevate themselves as a race and to subjugate other people as a race, which gets codified by a woman named Cheryl Harris, for example, in 93. She wrote a paper called Whiteness as Property, and she explains that whiteness was established by white people for the purposes of white supremacy, et cetera, as a form of private property that only white people have or can
Mm.
extend to others, like Irish or Germans or Jews or
Yeah.
whoever they wish,
Yeah.
or even to model minorities like Asians or so on, whatever, but never to black people and never to the fully
Hmm.
indigenous, right? But she conceives of it actually as a form of what Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto calls bourgeois private property. She even says that
Yes.
it's a form of
Yes.
bourgeois private property, which the Communist
Wow.
Manifesto is abundantly clear that he says communism can be summarized in a single sentence: abolish private
All
property.
private property.
After he says that by private property, he means
Yep.
bourgeois private
Yep.
property,
Yep.
by which he means capital.
Yes.
So it means your own private property that you are able to and allowed to go invest. In other words, you can take your pile of money to go make a bigger pile of money. And that's what's got to go away.
Oh,
I was like, wow, it's just the same worldview, but instead of the evil hand of capitalism and the bourgeois values that
yeah.
uphold it, we now have the evil specter of white supremacy and the
Yeah.
values of whiteness, which are just Western hegemonic values. They're just
Yeah.
literally the regular
Because it's telling you what to believe and what's right and wrong and what your values need to be and how
That's
to live
right.
life.
And
Like
who the angels
it's
and
a
who the
whole,
demons are. It's a
yeah,
fully, in the psychological
what the
terminology,
purpose
that's
of
a fully
life
split
is.
worldview. There's anti-racists and there's racists. That's
Yeah.
it. So they're the people who are dedicated to a communist revolution against the racist regime that exists today. And then there are a racial communist revolution. And then there are the people who wish to preserve the status quo, who are all racists. And so there's
Amazing.
no in between. They explicitly tell you there's no not racist.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so,
Oh,
yeah, it's a total
oh,
worldview,
yeah.
but
So
it's
great.
also a package of tools that you can pick up, which is called racial critique or racial consciousness raising, that you can then use in specialized circumstances layered into other things.
And one of the things I loved that Jordan Peterson cleared up for me too is that when you adopt one of these other worldviews too, what you're really doing is putting yourself in this position of moral superiority and you get to look down on everybody else because you have it all figured out. I loved how you laid that out in this education book in terms of there's the people that know and the people that don't know. It's that same kind of
Yeah, knower,
of
so
moral
racist
and
versus
yeah,
anti-racist, knower
and we're the
versus those not
enlightened and
allowed to
you're the
know.
idiots, and so we
Yeah.
need to enlighten you and we're on top. Oh,
And postmodernism works the same way.
oh.
They're the people who assign themselves the power to define what the discourses look like, what meaning
Mhm.
actually is. And then there are all the people who have different
Mhm.
meanings who aren't recognized because they're kept outside of the power structure.
It's just language games.
Same thing. Yeah, that's right. It's just the same
Yeah.
pattern over and over again. It's just disappointingly not creative.
That's
Um,
true, actually.
how, this is a question for you.
Yeah.
savvy with your audience, can I use Gnostic terminology and not lose people? Because some people might get this and some people might not. But if it's just going to lose everybody, there's not a lot of point in taking this little digression. It's very
Um,
short, though.
you could try it.
Okay, so very brief summary of Gnosticism that will satisfy nobody. Gnosticism is a ancient heretical belief that the God of the creator of the world is actually a demon that's called the demiurge, which comes from the Greek demiurgos, which means builder. And so he's not the real God. There's a real high God behind that. So we're actually trapped in a prison in our own existence in the world that was created by a demonic force called the demiurge, and we can wake up to the truth that there's a real higher God beyond the God that everybody thinks is God, the God of this world. So that's the idea. When you get into various schools of thought within the Gnostic thinking structure, you have these kind of lesser demons under the
Uh-huh.
demiurge called archons.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so what's happened with the whole Marxist philosophy, as we talked about at the Dallas workshop you came to, it's all
Mm-hmm.
socio-Gnostic. Rather than there being a spiritual realm that's split into this high God that's all good versus the demon that we all perceive that builds the world that we live in, it's not spiritual any longer. Now it's social. So there are social high gods that we have that are beyond our access, but then there's a social demon god that's built out the systems of power that we all live within. So each of those systems of power is like an archon. And so systemic racism is an archon. So critical race theory is addressing one of the archons of the Gnostic. That's
Mm-hmm.
one way to think about it.
Yeah. Could you say within that framework that it was something like that the misogyny or the patriarchy, would that be within the framework that you're talking about? That's like an archon, that's something that's controlling
Mhm.
us, that's the devil god
That's
that
exactly right.
okay, so that's what you
But
mean.
they're
So that's an
all like,
establishment that we can't get outside of, that's controlling us, that's the devil.
yeah, but the archons are like, they're
And then
like,
patriarchy is controlling everything we get to do. We have to fight it. And so
yes.
CRT is our tool. So we're going to fight this. And it's established as the reality. The patriarchy is a real thing. Like we can prove it. Here's our proofs. Let's use this really terrible, but they say helpful tool of CRT or whatever it is to
Mhm.
fight against the archons.
That's right. So yeah,
Okay.
it's like the demiurge overall is
Yeah.
like the evil builder god of the systems of the world. But the archons are like his emissaries. They work
Yeah.
in specific domains. There's
Yeah.
the archon that might govern the wind, and there's the archon that might govern the waters or whatever else, or that governs the human heart or whatever it happens to be. And so each of these systemic power dynamics, classism, racism, sexism, patriarchy, blah, 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 blah,
Mhm.
is like one of those like lesser beings in this
Mhm.
grand Gnostic
Mhm.
prison that we all live in. But that's
Mhm.
why they all act like we've been imprisoned in some
Oh,
world
yeah.
we don't want to live in, and they freak out like their rights and freedoms are being taken away from them
Yeah.
when all that's happening is literally they're not being expanded into places that are not even rights or freedoms.
It's mind blowing to listen to because when you listen for very long, not even very long, you start to realize that for people who are really entrenched in this, they really believe that like somebody somewhere had the skills, the ability, the resources, the forward thinking enough to have intentionally built this whole thing. Like that people really did sit in their dark corners and figure out how to build this patriarchy and that it's intentionally attacking them. It's crazy. And then one of the things that we talk
That's
about
a
in me a
theory.
lot is victim mentality. When I look at any one of these, I don't know whether you frame it as woke or critical race theory or whatever, what they're trying to do is draw everyone into that drama triangle. They want to
Hmm.
position the world as if it's all persecutors and victims and rescuers, and they want to position all of us as victims and be the rescuers. And the whole model is broken because that whole drama doesn't work. Everybody wants to be the victim. Everybody's just piling on top to be the victim. And that's why you do that in your home. Everybody's fighting because everybody wants to be the one that doesn't have to take responsibility and doesn't have to change things. And there's the big bad whatever out there. And to me, it's like at a very personal level, it's so dangerous because it causes people to evade personal responsibilities. I feel like at its root, that's a lot of how it deconstructs the human, deconstructs
Hmm.
the family, is when you really embrace it and you really become part of it, you don't you don't have to change as a person. You don't have to own your crap. You don't have to ask people, tell them you're sorry. You don't have to forgive them. You don't have to show up different. You don't have to do your job. You just get to complain and
Hmm.
moan and gripe.
I'll just tell you, not to make it still weird, but this is the Gnostic thing, right? So the Gnostic thing is that the idea is that we're actually perfectly spiritual beings. In fact, we're identical with God. We're not
Wow.
separated from this high God, but that we're all imprisoned in this material, crappy, fallen, fake world. And
Yeah.
so what actually enlightens you, knowing your true spiritual nature as an imprisoned creature who's been flung into the world, to use the Heidegger term for it,
Yeah.
what awakens you to that is suffering. You're suffering that you're not expressing yourself as you truly should be as a fully liberated being, which means a full integrated part of God again. That
Yeah.
suffering in the world, which makes you hate the world, becomes the currency. So this is
Wow.
why it's the same exact mentality. Everything you just described just is exactly the results of that
Yeah.
applied to social dynamics instead
Yeah.
of to a high spiritual cult, literally a spiritual cult. And this is why it's such a profound spiritual sickness that it causes in people, is because they are
So,
enacting spiritual sickness through social means, not realizing that they're engaging in this fundamental spiritual
yeah.
disease where
Yeah.
you've now inverted
Yeah.
the order of spirituality in your
Yes.
own
Right is wrong.
vainglorious belief that you, in fact, are
Mhm.
continuous with the Most High.
And that you have the answers and that you're going to rescue the world and
They don't get it. They have
that
false,
everybody
think
get except for
everything's
you.
real, not fallen and crappy and an image and
Yeah.
mundane and not spiritual. They don't get it. You have to wake them up. They have to be
Yeah.
woke.
Yeah. It's crazy. I did a YouTube channel. I used to do book reviews, and one time I did a Communist Manifesto book review. And my particular copy had a really nice introduction. And then in that introduction, he talked about what I believe to be the truth, that you can look at Marxism as a religion and that it has many of the tenets of a traditional religion. It gives you a purpose in life. It tells you who you are. It tells you what you're supposed to devote your life to. It tells you what's right and wrong. And he says it also invokes the same kind of religious fervor, the kind of fervor and passion that has been traditionally evoked with a God relationship. And I got so much crap. So many people making comments. You're such an idiot. You don't have a clue what you're talking about. Why don't you study real Marxism? Why don't you all this kind of stuff? I just still blown away by the fact that I guess some people maybe it took and they agreed, but I still can't believe how many people were just so averse to that, to looking at it that way, because that made absolute sense to me.
Yeah, people flip out about it, but it's the word religion has to be used with some caution here because do
Sure.
you consider heretical cults religions?
Sure.
But they certainly get adhered to with religious fervor and
Yeah.
under a judicial definition of religion for like Establishment Clause purposes, it meets the definition, which
I
is,
mean,
by
just
the
read
way,
Wild Swans and
yeah,
you'll
yeah,
see exactly what it felt like. What the stupid meetings and the confessions and the anyway.
that's right. So I don't think that's crazy, but I
Yeah.
don't know where it goes. But I can't look at it other than not just as religious in its orientation, but specifically as a recreation of Gnostic cults, which gets me in
Yeah.
all kinds of trouble. I was getting made fun of on
Sure.
the internet for this
Sure.
today. I get made fun of almost
Sure.
every day for this. Gone.
Otherwise, why eradicate all other religions in the first place? Because you are trying to tap into the same emotions that religions are and you're competing with them. So you have, that's why they're always, as soon as communism really takes hold. Anyway, that's a whole other, we're getting
That's a
off in the
whole
weeds.
thing, but it's
Okay.
100% right.
Okay. Let me ask you a couple. That's just for my own curiosity. Okay. So here's a big question. You now have been at this long enough that you have gotten a lot of grief. So, my question is, why do you keep doing it?
Yeah, one does wonder that sometimes. No, actually, I'm very blessed to get to hear somebody else give the answer that you know is the right answer. So then you know what the answer
Mm,
is, and you can just say, this guy said, and you
hmm.
don't have to think of your own because he
Yeah.
said it. And
Yeah.
so I was at an event. I don't know if you've heard of the film that I helped produce a couple of years ago called Beneath Sheep's Clothing,
I heard you
but
mentioned it, but I've not seen it.
yeah, it's pretty good. I'll say it's a
Yeah.
good film.
Yeah.
And I think it had a pretty good, it made a pretty good splash last year when we put it out. But this
Yeah.
would have been about a year earlier. And I was out in Utah at a fundraiser to try to
Oh.
raise some of the initial production cost money for the film,
Hmm.
and which turned out to be a successful fundraiser. It was very good.
Nice.
But one of the other guys who was helping, who helped organize this fundraiser and put the event on and all this, had just suffered a close family friend dying. and their funeral
Mm.
was that day, earlier in the same day as the event.
Oh.
So we had this event planned, and then somebody dies, and then he has to go to a funeral in the afternoon, and then at 5:30 we have a barbecue and an event. I mean, he's a great guy. He wasn't on his normal emotional level, is what I
Yeah.
would phrase this as. He wasn't like
Yeah.
wild or weird or broken down or anything, but as you can imagine, he's got a different perspective he brings to the table.
Sure.
So he stands up and he ends up having this kind of like emotional moment where he says what he wants to say about the film and why it's important, but you can tell he took what would have been like 15 minutes of remarks and shrunk it to three. And then he was
Mhm.
like, my friend just died, and it had me thinking all day. And basically, why should you support this film? The reason you should support this film is the same thing I was thinking about. And it was a little awkward, but what he said was, I was thinking, why do I do this?
Yeah.
And he's like, as soon as I asked myself, he's talking about how he's driving in the car back from the funeral. Why do I do this? Why am I in this
Mhm.
fight? Why do I get up every day? And he gets his own grief, right? Why do I do this? And so he's immediately came to my mind, my kids, right? I do it for my kids because they're
Yeah.
the next generation.
Yeah.
And then he thought, no, it can't be that. It's too selfish. It's too small, actually. And then he was like, I do it for everybody's kids, for the whole next generation. And then he
Mhm.
thought, no, I care about that, but I don't care enough about that.
Mhm.
It's too abstract in a way.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so then he's like, I do it for my family, and he had the same kind of roadblock. I do it for myself, and that wasn't right. And he finally said that I don't remember, he had this whole progression of things. It went on for a little bit, but then he
Yeah.
finally says, it finally came to me, it struck me that I do this because I know in every bit of my heart that if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror in the morning when I wake up. Every bit of my soul tells me every single day I have to do this. So I get asked this question a lot. Why do you put up with the trouble? Why do you put up with the fighting? Why do you put up with the doxing, the smearing, the slander, the harassment, the bullying, the every other thing,
Yeah.
cancellations from every which way,
Yeah.
and then just keep going? And the dumb answer is I don't know how not to. And I don't mean that in a stupid way.
Yeah.
I don't know how to live with myself if this isn't what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I could just go get like a normal job and just enjoy my life. I've got a great place to live. I have a comfortable life. I have a great family. Like I could just move on. And then
Yeah.
it's no, I couldn't because every single day I'm going to think about this stuff, be still working out the ideas. I'm probably going to end up doing the reading again. And then I'm going to get pulled back into it because I got to tell somebody about what I read. Holy crap.
Mhm.
And so I do it because I have to. Like, and I don't know why I have to. I just have to. I couldn't live with myself if I wasn't.
Mm.
And when you have that feeling, trouble coming your way doesn't matter that much. It's okay, so what? It's just part of the process. It's not fun or pleasant. Like, I have better and worse moments, but at no point is there time to pack up and do something else.
Mhm.
The only time that I have any doubt of that kind whatsoever is when I wonder if the work that I'm doing is effective. At which point it's
Mhm.
not should I quit, it's should I completely retool and figure out how to be effective and just
Mm.
basically not put anything out until I figure that out.
Mm.
And like that's just a matter of pragmatics though. That's not a
Uh,
it's not a fundamental deviation from actually doing the thing. And then I realized I've got a limited set of talents here and I've got a highly refined capacity to do what I'm doing. And I don't see it anywhere else, honestly, except in very small places and a small number of people. And so I
Yeah.
better just kind of keep going and doing what I'm doing, and we'll see where the chips fall.
Yeah. And at this point, the more that you know, the better resource you are, the more connections you can create for people, and the more you can help them make sense of. And I know you contribute when there's been lawsuits and other things like that. It's not just your books and your writing and your events, but there's a lot of that.
Done a lot of stuff.
Yeah, done a lot of stuff. Before we finish up, I want to touch on something that had a little bit different direction for a minute because I got turned on through Locke 20 years ago. He introduced me to the natural law. I felt cheated because I never got it in school.
Hmm.
And then I started making connections to, oh, it's in our declaration, and oh, it's been talked about forever. And so that's the lens through which I work with women, that there are things that are objectively true. They are always true. They're true for everyone. There are things that are written on our heart. That's one way to talk about it. And the thing that you say a lot, that I quote a lot, is that reality is what you bump up against when your beliefs are wrong, or some variation on that theme. And then when we were at this event, your ending presentation was a lot about what truth is and why it matters and how we get back to that. Can you just talk just for a minute to whoever might be listening about why you believe that there's objective truth and what you mean by this reality is what you bump up against when your belief is wrong, and why all of that matters, why that's part of what you champion?
It's just what the deepest philosophical question in the world. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Um,
you're welcome.
yeah, no, why is reality, right? That's
Yeah.
like the philosophical question.
But why do
But
you even, we have just talked about worldviews that even reject reality. I mean, I'm saying, I guess, didn't used to be a choice to believe in it, but it is today. And so for you, why do those things matter? Why do you talk about things in that way? What is truth
so
to you? What is reality to you?
Sure. What I don't want to do is turn this into a long discussion about the philosophy of science of why I think that realism is the correct philosophical position. Realism being the belief that reality exists external to us and is
Yeah.
objective to each of us. A
Yeah.
very simple explanation that doesn't satisfy everybody, but it satisfies a lot of people
Yeah.
is that let's say that I set up just a thought experiment. I set up a room and there's nothing in the room but a chair and a table and something on the table. What the something is does not matter. Okay. And now 100 people randomly selected from wherever walks of life you want. I don't care what walks
Hmm.
of life. We even
Hmm.
have a dog among the list to the degree that the dog is capable of doing things as a dog.
Sure.
And we put them one after another to go into the room and pretend they have a pad of paper and a pencil besides the object. And it's write down what's on the table. And then they come out and the door's closed. Nobody can see inside. Nobody knows what was it. We get the paper. We have all 100 people go, including we can even video how the dog interacts with the thing on the table if it does.
Uh-huh.
You can imagine it's set up so the dog might sniff it or whatever, right? The thing is, every single one of them, to within some range of error or tolerance, would describe the same thing,
Yeah.
right? So they
Yeah.
would therefore perceive the same thing.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't matter if we picked this random sample or that random sample, and it wouldn't matter if we were using other tools like different kinds of maybe we scan the room with light, which is photons, maybe we scan the room with electrons, maybe we scan the room with protons or neutrons or any of these other kind of part. Doesn't matter how we do it. We're going to get a bunch of descriptions or whatever of the thing that all have consilience. They all line up in some way or another. And the simplest, in my opinion, explanation for how that's possible is that we actually live in a world where things are real and they're outside of our imaginations, they're outside of our heads. We can get into complicated things like, no, we're a brain in a vat, but then you have to explain how your whole world is your brain in your vat. And somehow every other person who has as much will to do whatever it is that they want to or would still manages to perceive the thing the same way that you perceive it. So it's just a lot easier to just cut the BS. As Mr. T once said, he made a series of funny videos back in the day and giving basic advice, and one of them was Mr. T on public speaking, and he's like, "Cut out the jibber jabber. Say what you got to say. That's all. Reality is real. Is just cutting out the jibber jabber,
Uh-huh.
saying what you got to say.
Uh-huh.
That's all." So it does take a modicum of faith to believe that reality is real and that we're perceiving an external reality.
Yeah.
But because of the fact that every single external observer, given a simple enough task to observe something, will give conciliatory answers to one another, it's
Mm-hmm.
just way easier to assume that reality is real.
Mm-hmm.
And, this again, without getting into a long description of the philosophy of science or even possibly why human beings have sense apparatuses and why they work the way that they do, why they
Right.
have fidelity, blah, blah, blah. All that's a fun and exciting exploration. We could go down those roads. I have things to say. But the point is, we would all basically agree on the features of reality pretty closely, which is pretty hard to explain unless it's just actually there.
Yeah.
And okay, so once we decide that reality's actually there, truth becomes this thing that
Yeah.
somehow represents that which is in reality. In other words, I
Yeah.
subscribe to what philosophers call the correspondence theory of truth. Those ideas that correspond faithfully to reality are true. Does
Yeah.
that mean that we know them accurately? No. Does it mean that our ideas are not ideas but are actually real? No. Our ideas are still ideas. But when they accurately describe reality to a fair enough degree, I talk
Yeah.
about these things in the workshop. I talk
Yeah.
about the big four operational criteria by which we can judge a model of reality. Does it have predictive power? Does it have explanatory power?
Yeah. I loved
Does it
that.
have, is it parsimonious?
Yeah.
No extra assumptions, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
whatever they are. Because I have to write those ones down.
Yeah.
But because we can then make a judgment about the reality and say that, well, probably the thing is real. And what is true about the thing is that which corresponds to what everybody, not most people, everybody would, if their sense faculties are working, reasonable tolerance would
Yeah.
conclude about it, including even, animals and other things. If I put a plant on the table and a snail in the room, you're never going to see the snail flying or something. It's if it's crawling
Right.
on the plant, it's always going to be on the plant. So
Right.
it's even its sense of touch is connected to the object really physically being there.
Yeah.
It's like it's not just floating near it or something. So that's just the best explanation. So for
Yeah.
me, truth then is what corresponds to reality,
Yeah.
with reality being something that's out there. This
Yeah.
also takes a drop of faith, but then it's what do you do with the fact this is a deep philosophical question? Like I said, this is an important question in the
Yeah.
philosophy of science,
Yeah.
in epistemology. But
Yeah.
what do you do with the fact that, okay, you said the thing on the table is a plant, right? But you could call it a different name. You could specify what kind of plant it is. You could play this stupid game like tree is tree in English and it's arbol in Spanish.
Sure.
Like you could do, why does that word or the idea that word represents, how do you know that's what's real? It's easier to deal with that with like fundamental particles if you look, because there's not a lot going on with them. But if you have a proton and you fire it at a thing, you can describe its behavior fantastically. You can tell exactly what it's, you can guess its momentum, you can tell how fast it's going, you can do all
Mhm.
kinds of things about it, right? You can see how it scatters and you can be very precise. You can do a lot of stuff very accurately. How do you know it's actually a proton? You don't. There's some object that we agree to call, or phenomenon actually, maybe physical phenomenon, we agree to call a proton,
Yeah.
and it definitely exhibits these behaviors that can be explained by these properties. So that's called a model. So there's an entire school of thought. It was created by Stephen Hawking and his colleague Leonard Mlodinow, and he wrote about it in a book called The Grand Design. If you want to read it for yourself, called Model Dependent Realism. I had the
Hmm.
good luck one time of running into Leonard Mlodinow himself,
Ah.
and the Caltech physicist, and I talked to him about model dependent realism, and he was like,
Wow.
"Why don't you explain to me what you think it is?" And I explained to him what I think it is. And he was like, "That's a better explanation than I would have given. I think you understand it. I
Okay.
believe in this." This is a
Yeah.
lot to say. What I
Yeah.
mean is, I believe there's reality. I believe the best we can do is create models of reality. Those
Hmm.
models have a degree of accuracy and correspondence. At that level, you can compare them one to the other, but it doesn't matter if the actual contents of the model are literally true, that a proton is literally a proton instead of some phenomenon that happens to exactly act the way the thing we describe in this model as a proton. That doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And that's basically the idea. Okay, so once you get to that point, you can agree that reality exists, that reality has certain principles, that reality behaves in certain ways. So there's all of physical truth just falls out of that. The
Sure.
reality is out there. It's
Sure.
discernible. It's
Sure.
not always
Sure.
easy. We can apply reason, logic, inference,
Hmm.
deduction, all these
Hmm.
logical tools to try to figure out what the data are telling us when we do experiments. We can rule out certain explanations. We can posit other explanations. Out at the fringes, like in cosmology, there's 30 explanations because nobody knows which one's for sure yet, and they're competing with one another.
Yeah.
But what about things like moral truth?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. How do you
That's the
layer that
deeper
with human
level.
experience? Yeah.
There are different ways to do this. One way is the natural law way, which is the direction I'm going to take in a way that you might not expect. The other way is the religious way, which in my opinion is fine, but also a shortcut, which is to say that the law is written on every human heart. And
Mhm.
so, in better language, honestly, what we have is general revelation to work things out and special revelation to help us do it.
Yeah.
And that's, in my opinion, a shortcut. If we try to take that off the table to get the harder answer, my answer usually starts with this very weird sentence that I end up saying to a lot of people who never seem to understand what I'm talking about. I even said it in the back of the room to a guy at the workshop in Dallas, is that human beings are a bounded set. How do I know that? Because if we have our room, that I was just describing and there's a person in the room,
Hmm. Hmm.
you're going to know it's a person. If there was a
Hmm.
chimpanzee in the room instead, you wouldn't think it's a person. If
Hmm.
there was a banana, you wouldn't think it's a person. If it's a
Hmm.
rock, you wouldn't think it's a person. So there's only so many states in which matter, if we want to be purely materialist about it, can exist and that still be human. In other words, humanity
Yeah.
is a bounded set,
Yeah.
which for whatever reasons, be that evolution, be that creation, be that whatever the
Yeah.
explanation for how we got here and how we are, whatever it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
it's got ends. It only goes so far, and then you're not that anymore. Something else,
Mm.
okay? So
Okay.
we are some kind of a social species. We live
Yes.
not just in small bands, but in small bands that band together into larger bands,
Hmm.
into communities, into even nations and beyond. We have this very complicated, and the technical word for it is ultra sociality. We are, for whatever reason, an ultra social animal that has all these different properties. We have our own brands of, we have needs, food,
Yeah.
water,
Yep.
sleep, shelter, so on. We
Hmm.
have, for whatever set of reasons in our sociality, a sense of fairness. We have a desire to do well in the world. We have
Hmm.
actually capacity for cooperation.
Hmm.
Because we have the capacity for cooperation, we have the capacity to get cheated. Therefore, we develop high intelligence to make sure that we can work with each other without getting cheated by each other. There are lots of reasons to believe that if you buy the evolutionary hypothesis, that's why humans are primarily so smart, was so that we
Mm.
can figure out how to work together and not get cheated by free riders that would
Yeah.
basically be parasites on your tribe or your community. So
Sure.
you have to figure out what people's intentions are with what they're doing and why they're doing it. Whatever the causes of all of that, maybe we're just created and that's the situation. Maybe we evolved this way. Whatever the causes,
Yeah.
that defines a wide set of parameters
Yeah.
by which we have to interact with each other. And there are better and worse answers. I'm
Yeah.
not saying there are perfect answers, there are better and worse answers for how we're going to do that. We call that morality.
Yeah.
Better answers are
Yeah.
considered moral, and you can say moral in a local sense, like Islam has its set of values,
Hmm.
and then Christianity has a set of
Hmm.
values, and Western liberalism,
Hmm.
regardless of religion, has a set of values. But at the same time, there's still the fact that human societies, you can measure how well are they flourishing,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
productive are
You
they,
can,
how much are they
we have
developing,
enough information to
can
look
they
back and
feed everybody, do they
hmm
have to kill people they don't know how to deal with. There are some pretty basic things, and then there's some pretty sophisticated and complicated things where you can measure and say which of these sets of values actually promotes flourishing better. And
yeah.
I know that some people are going to recognize that this is a spin-off of Sam Harris's argument in The Moral Landscape,
Hmm.
which people have accused of being kind of moral relativist. What I think is that there might be multiple answers to what good morality is, but because humans are a bounded set, most of the right answers for most people most of the time are going to overlap. Now, what does that mean
Yeah.
for a culture that has completely different values and it's functioning, but maybe at a lower level? Can you just say, take some backwards tribe in Pakistan of angry Muslims and transform them into liberal, loving Western Christians? The answer is no, because it's really hard to change the way that people understand the world as the communists have learned. You can't just change in one generation how people think about the world, how communities share and transmit knowledge. It has nothing to do with race, but has a ton to do with culture. Is that
Yeah.
we share and transmit knowledge in different ways for different purposes and tend to have very sticky cultural underpinnings that it's like the weird conservative thing. This is what we've done and it works, and there might be something that works better, but by God, we're not messing up to find out. But the short answer is that there are moral truths because there are only so many, there might be more than one, but there are only so many good answers to these questions. And
Yeah.
it is very likely that there are actually optimal answers to these questions. And I think the United States is one of these, this is what the point of my lecture was in some senses, that the United States proves out that the principles of voluntary exchange with
Hmm.
safeguarded private property rights unlock abundance, prosperity, and wealth. Period. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter
It's
who you're
indisputable.
talking about. It doesn't matter where they're from. This is a universal principle. So the value set that honors the ability to engage in voluntary exchange of secured private property
Yeah.
is going to produce greater abundance, wealth, and prosperity for the people who
Yeah.
engage in it.
Hmm.
And it's just a fundamental fact. Like another fact of human nature is that at the end of the day, as communal and ultra social and whatever highfalutin stuff we are, we're also self interested.
Yes.
Like number one is still number one. And you can say, I'm
Enlightenment is,
religious, God is number one. We know what we you don't have to play word games with me. We all know what looking out for number one means. And it means
hmm
you're taking care of yourself first. And we're all self-interested. So what this weird system we have of voluntary exchange and secured private property, what it
yeah.
allows me to do is to have a self-interested motive to help a stranger. If you have, I use the example of hammers. So if you have a loose nail on your house
Mhm.
and I don't care. It's not my problem. You need something to drive in that nail. If I happen to be good at buying hammers, I don't have to know you. I don't have to care about you. I don't have to care about your wall. I don't have to care about what you're doing about, I don't care about your problem. But you'll give me $20 for a hammer, and I care about $20. So
Yeah.
now I'm investing my time and resources to create the object that you need so that you can solve your problem without even
Yeah.
knowing you or your problem or caring about it. So all of a sudden, self-interest becomes mutual interest.
Yes.
It solves that problem. And so this kind of a system fits with our, if you're Christian, you'll say fallen human nature, where we're looking out for number one instead of
hmm
number one,
hmm
right?
hmm
So these are, again, I did this in New Zealand, actually, a very similar talk to that portion of the presentation I gave in Dallas.
hmm
And I had the wherewithal in New Zealand, which I did not have in Dallas after 6 lectures and being exhausted. But in New Zealand, I had the wherewithal in front of this crowd to say all these principles about basically what amounts to free enterprise,
Yeah.
why they produce wealth and abundance. And at the end was like, and obviously they have this huge issue with the racial issue with the Maori and the Pacifica and all of the different peoples. And I was like, and notice that what I just said is true for every single person. I didn't have to mention that it's more true for white people or Maori people or any race. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So the fact that there are universally true things that produce greater abundance, flourishing, and so on
Yeah.
means that there must be some objective moral truths. The problem is that some values are socially constructed,
Yeah.
sometimes for legitimate reasons, derivative to real stuff, and sometimes for completely arbitrary reasons, which is why I also
Yeah.
think a principle of free inquiry allows you to say, does that tradition that we have here
Yeah.
really work? Or
Yeah.
is it just something we do because we do it?
Yeah.
Does it really work? And that
Yeah.
requires free inquiry, because otherwise, the second you say, what about this tradition? Somebody cuts your head off because now you're a threat to the tribe. So the second you have free inquiry, what you can do is you have one of the big four operational criteria was optimal flexibility. It was the ability to abandon a bad idea in favor of a better idea.
Yeah.
And if you have free inquiry, you can then say, I don't know about this tradition. Then you can have a debate about it with violence not on the table and discuss, what is this
Yeah.
real? Is this actually, is there something better we could do? Can we do an experiment and find out? Kind of test both of them, A B test this and see what happens. And you can start to find better solutions to ways that you deal with building the complex problem of how do you build and run and manage a society.
Yeah.
And history, in some sense, is this weird collection of uncontrolled, unregulated experiments and how this is done. You have countries
Yeah.
that have all these principles and they decide they're going to have, I don't know, a great society program instituted by President Johnson. Everything gets worse. And you say, that was a mistake. We shouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's so well said.
In other
What?
words, human nature exists. That's the short version.
Yeah. Yeah. And we ignore it or go against it at our peril. That's
Right.
really like
The
one of the
hard
things.
part for it is that there are genuinely places for wiggle room within human nature.
Sure.
There are perfectly acceptable different ways to cut your hair and
Yes.
style your hair
Yes.
from one culture to another, and it literally doesn't matter.
Yeah. One of the things that I love to quote is from Democracy in America. In the preface, Tocqueville, it's like a letter to the French. It's, hey, I've written this book for you. Here's what I want you to think about. I can't give you the whole paragraph, but basically he says the idea is what they're doing is working pretty well. And I really think we ought to follow the American model. And he says, but we need to follow her principles, not the specifics of her laws, basically. And that kind of speaks to what you're saying here, that there are things, there are fundamental principles that made America work. And that's what Tocqueville recognized that France needed, right, at mid 1800s. That's definitely what they needed. And if they were to embrace those, but do it the French way, because you can do it the French way. And that's what he understood. We can still be us,
Hmm.
but those are objective, human, moral, societal, governmental truths, principles, however you want to talk about them, that will just create flourishing if we'll just get behind them, infuse them into our systems in whatever way we possibly can.
Yeah, it's that variation or variability on themes erected off of core universal and fundamental principles is actually at the basis for why I think things in the moral universe are true,
Yeah.
beyond obviously physical truths,
Yeah.
which we had to waste time because we live in postmodernity now. So somebody has to say that reality is not real. And how
I
do you know? And
know.
what do you mean by real?
So,
What does is mean? How are we going to
yeah.
rearrange our discourses so that I
Yeah.
win the argument is what postmodernism is really
Yeah.
about.
And that's for me where I feel like individual expression really comes in play, different cultures. We can have all of that individuality and we can have culturally or individually or whatever as a society, we can be who we are. We can be the French, we can be the whatever, but we're not going to thrive unless we accept that there are certain proper ways to bring about human flourishing and we've got to get behind them.
That human nature exists.
Yeah.
Also, the physical world exists. Or
Yeah.
another way to
And
say
it's
human
crazy
nature
that we
exists
have to
is
defend the 150
humans are a
years ago.
balance.
We wouldn't even be having this conversation. It would have been, what are you even talking about? Why are you even defending that? It's so common sense.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, the
last
reason is
question
because
for you.
academics didn't defend their turf properly, and now
I
we're all living
know.
in
I
their
know.
nightmare.
I know. There's this great, you know, who Robert Hutchins and Mortimer Adler and all of them were, University of Chicago, all that stuff. There's this really great phrase in Robert Hutchins' book. He's looking back on the time when he was debating Dewey and all of that stuff was going on. And he says, at the time, I really thought we were doing a good job. I really thought we were making headway. I really thought we were preserving the liberal tradition. And I realize now that I was just a stopper in the bathtub. And it's a discouraging, sad, actually, that and it's hard not to feel that way sometimes. It's hard not to feel discouraged about where things are and to feel so small and to feel so insignificant, especially for all of us that aren't nearly as brilliant as you. I would love to end by, and I don't know if maybe you need to think about this for a minute or whatever, but what could you say? What would you choose to say to parents today? What is there one, two, three things that this would be my recommendation for you, whether it be something they could read, something they could watch, something they could do? My answer is always educate yourself, educate yourself. That's we've got an academy. It's encourage our women to be lifelong learners, try to point them to good resources. You've been in this quite a lot. You have a very deep understanding of a lot of what's happening culturally. So, what advice would you give to the parents that are listening?
Without hesitation, the first thing to say is what you're doing matters. What you are
Yeah,
doing actually matters, especially as parents. You're raising the next generation. So,
yeah,
what you do for good matters, and what you do for ill matters. Where you decide to be lazy matters. Where you decide to be diligent matters. It makes a difference. There's this principle in the Moms for Liberty group of being joyful warriors. Not that they're the only people who ever thought of it, but obviously they've made it a big part of their brand. And the one of the founders at the time, who she's moved on now, is Tiffany Justice, and she said that she's a mother, right? She's I have 4 kids.
yeah,
I don't want to be angry all the time. I don't want them to lose their mother to my political advocacy. I
mm,
need to be present for them. I need to be a smile on my face, in a good mood. I can't be angry and
yes,
miserable and frustrated all the time. So what you're doing matters. Your children are watching, your community is watching, your children are watching. So
yeah,
how you engage matters. That you are, for you guys, lifelong learners matters. And in fact, that's related to that is Sue in Art of War says, and I butcher it, but the gist is if you know your enemy and you know yourself, you don't need to fear any battle. If you only know yourself, but you don't know your enemy, for every battle you win, you'll also lose one. And then he says, if neither your enemy nor yourself, then he basically says you're going to succumb in every battle. You're going to get your butt
mhm,
handed to you, right? Lifelong learning, I think, is actually key, but let's focus it. You need to know your
yes,
enemy and you need to know yourself. So, what's your
yes,
enemy? It's this the stuff that's coming in trying to disturb your way of life. And what is yourself? It's your way of life. So that means who are we as a people? That
yes,
politically, culturally,
yes,
economically, you have to know those foundations. You have to teach your children those foundations. You have to increase in your understanding by teaching your children those foundations and engaging
yes,
in them. who are we spiritually? If you're a person of faith, that's a very important part of who you are and a very important part of who you're teaching your children to be. The raising, educating, and discipling of children are the three kind of things that are usually brought up as the core functions of parents. And so you need to be engaged in that, but that means you need to understand it. So if you want to be on the avant-garde of making a difference, you need to know who you are
Yeah.
politically, economically, socially. You need to understand the tenets of your country, the tenets of your faith, the tenets of the long tradition in which of prosperity that we're all embedded. There's a lot to know about yourself that we've been able to take on cruise control for a lot of time. A lot of homeschool parents are not, but other parents, a lot of everybody is just taking it on cruise control. So there's a lot of fun stuff to do and know yourself and then knowing your enemy. Like it depends on how you want to engage in the battle, right? You have to prepare your kids for the road that they're going to walk one way or
Yeah.
the other. You can't go out and change the road, not much. You can change it a little. Like your
Yeah.
advocacy does matter. It can make a difference. But for the most part, you've got to prepare your kids to walk the road. They're in this, like we were just laughing about. We live in this stupid postmodern world where these stupid
Yeah.
arguments about what words mean and if reality's real come up, where everything's like race and gender all the time.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to engage with that's not part of you want your kids to have a normal childhood. Sorry
Right.
that ship sailed. You have to engage them. We're very fortunate. You could say, I would just want my kid to have a normal childhood. Let's go back 400 years. And I think there shouldn't be famines. No, you have to teach your kids to be ready for the famine when it comes. And it turns out right now, what you have to teach your kids to be ready for is political warfare and brainwashing,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But at
Yeah.
least they're not as likely, who knows what could happen if it goes bad, to have to weather a famine, right? So
Yeah.
you have to prepare your kids for the road, which means you also have to learn. If all you want to do is just tend to your own garden, your own children, you still have to learn some of the stuff. But if
Yes.
you want to engage in advocacy, if you want to try to go be a part of a group that's making a difference, if you want to get involved at the local level in politics, or just if you just want to have even like a Bible study that's culturally informed or a civics
Yeah.
study,
Yeah.
imagine the exact same thing as a Bible study, except you're doing like the Declaration of Independence. P.S., by the way, a lot of people are surprised when they hear this. You can do that. It's allowed,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Yeah.
the idea of getting together and studying
Called the book club. Goes all the way
works.
back to
They're called, yeah,
Benjamin
they're,
Franklin.
you
Change the world
do
with the book club.
all of that stuff. You have to enrich and understand. If you want to do that well, you have to be able to enrich and understand in comparison to the world that we actually live in, which means
Yeah.
unfortunately you got to learn some woke crap. So I, as you said, educate. So, you matter. You need to get educated. A lot of kind of broad principles. Like the goal of this thing is to make you despair, to make you want to quit. So how do
Right.
you not, you can't. So how do you can't quit for your kids. Let them watch you quit. Yeah, that's great,
Yeah.
mom. So what do you do? Whether it's faith in your religious faith in God, whether it's faith in your country, whether it's faith in just the principles that your family or the tradition, like you need that and you need
Yeah.
to renew it and you need to intentionally take measures to renew that. In other words, it's keep yourself healthy so that you can mentally, emotionally,
Hmm.
physically,
Hmm.
spiritually, you can
Hmm.
nourish others. It's
Yeah.
a really big thing. There's lots more stuff that could be said. Literally, I think I told you before we started, I am literally writing a book about this, and there's 70 things,
So
and I don't want to
excited.
just start rattling them all
Hmm.
off.
Hmm.
And I could tell you the title, but I don't have one yet. So I don't know what the title of the book is. Tease you with it enough. We haven't got that far. We're just going
Yeah.
to write it first. And there's principles in there: love the truth, always do the right thing, even when there's
Awesome.
consequences, actually, especially when there's consequences. I also have very practical advice. If you want to be useful in the public policy or community in that legalist way, learn to read legislation.
Yeah.
Learn to read woke. Like we said,
Yeah.
it's another language, another set of
Yes.
discourses. You
Yes.
can't peel apart the document your kid's school sent home unless you can read for
Yeah.
keywords and
Hmm.
buzzwords and decode what they mean.
Hmm.
So learn to read it and do the reading. But yeah, mostly my advice is just general and generic. Your kids are number one. You need to take care of them and you need to remember that what you do matters. It doesn't matter how small you are, right? So I give this talk sometimes. It's this really inspiring thing I say. People cry. It's exciting. So nobody is going to
Aw.
crying. But one of my favorite scenes, and this is dorky, but one of my favorite scenes in Lord of the Rings
Uh-huh.
is when the tree people just went and spoilers are coming. So the tree people just got really mad and went and destroyed the evil fortress of Orthanc,
Hmm.
right? In Isengard. So couldn't destroy Orthanc actually, but they destroyed Isengard. So the tree
Hmm.
people just did their thing. And
Hmm.
then the wizard Gandalf is explaining what happened. And what happened was that these two Hobbit characters, Merry and Pippin, get captured by the bad orcs and dragged off, and they escape into the forest in a dramatic scene. And then they meet the tree people, and they tell the tree people what's going on in the world. The tree people get pissed off, and they go to destroy this thing. And
Yeah.
so Gandalf's trying to relate this to other people, and he says, in his very Gandalf way, I think the coming of Merry and Pippin to Fangorn Forest was like the loosing of two stones that felled an avalanche. And
Wow.
so I tell people, you don't have to be Gandalf. You can be just somebody who's kicked a small stone that hits another stone, that the next thing you know, the side of the mountain's coming down. And I could probably sit here and different times, different talks, I come up with different people, and I just start rattling off everyday normal people, people whose names I don't even know in a lot of cases, who
Yeah.
were the catalysts that triggered somebody to get involved, who became a really big deal, who made a gigantic difference. So even if you don't end up being the guy going to do the thing or the mom going to change the world, that
Yeah.
conversation that you have at lunch might put an idea in somebody's
Yeah.
head. Again, an example I use a lot here is Billboard Chris. And everybody thinks, okay, so he was just a dad, and now he does this thing in worldwide activism. He's made a huge dent in the gender ideology and transgender thing, helped parents all over the world. But it's not Billboard Chris who's the small stone. Billboard Chris was at lunch with somebody who told him about puberty blockers, which he had never heard about before. So somebody just
Mm.
had the courage or the gall or whatever to mention
Hmm.
puberty blockers in Vancouver, in front, I think in Vancouver, that's where he lives, in front
Hmm.
of Chris.
Hmm.
Chris is shocked by these two words next to each other, goes home, looks them up, finds out what they are, freaks out, starts his advocacy. So the
Hmm.
person, the unnamed person who happened to just be talking and mention that, started an avalanche.
Yeah.
That's being a small stone. And I can't encourage you to realize how important that is. The bottom line there is that you need to be telling the truth as much as you can all the time. When you tell the truth, you put
Yes.
truth into the world. You don't
Yes.
know what that truth is going to go do now that it's loose in the world.
Yeah.
And a truth, as I said in Dallas, has the power to level any error that it touches. That's the power of a truth. The example I gave is a very fun example where imagine we have three really smart people in the room up on the stage, and we say how wide is the room, and they all give their guesses, and they argue in
Mhm.
one different guesses and why they're right, and they're big important philosophers or whatever.
Yeah.
And all their argument doesn't get us any closer to the truth until the janitor walks in the back with a tape measure, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden their reputations are on the line because they've all just made an ass of themselves defending their answer that's about to get showed out by the least of these pulling the tape
Yeah.
measure and seeing how big the room really is. Because the fact is, it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter what their state or stature is, it doesn't matter how much of an expert or how holy or how politically important or how fantastic they are, how nice a guy they are, how good an arguer they are, how many people in the room they convinced by consensus that they're right. It doesn't matter any of that. Once the actual measurement comes, once the truth shows up,
Yeah.
everybody who's right is vindicated and everybody who's wrong is shown to be an error.
Yeah.
And so when you put a truth out into the world about anything, you don't know where that truth's going to go. It might not go far. If you put 10,000 truths in the world, one of them might make it a pretty good distance. And
Yeah.
that truth will eventually, through somebody else or through you or whatever, encounter an error that it levels. And now
Mm.
you've cleaned up some error in the world. So I
Love that.
tell normal people and parents, especially, a lot to realize that it doesn't matter if you think you're just a regular mom or you're just a small character and you're never going to play a big role. It's like you don't have to. And in fact, nobody's too small to make a difference. Just, and what do? You take care of your kids, you raise them, you tell the truth, you get involved where you can.
Yeah.
Just very basic stuff, and it actually adds up. That's the idea of the American principle of self-government. It's if we're all taking care of our own stuff and taking care in a way where it ends up bleeding over through trade or exchange with our neighbors, then everything rises.
Yeah. That's
It's the same
beautiful.
principle.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So well said. There's something I was thinking about that came from you and a few other sources when I started to understand over the last couple of years that it really hit me that we are all responsible for our culture. Our culture is creating the future. And what you're saying is that every single person that adds positively to that culture nurtures it. We're either nurturing a good culture or a bad culture. We're either paving the way for things to be better or for things to be worse. And that's another reason why every single person matters because they're part of the greater culture and they're responsible to it to try to nurture it, try to make it healthier. And that's why it's so important that wherever you stand,
That's right.
you
And
just stand for whatever that is, even when it seems so tiny, because you know what's right. And so you stand there, and then there's enough of us standing, and before you know it, the culture isn't quite as sick as it was.
that's right. And your kids are watching.
Yes. And what you do matters way more than what you say. So walk the
Yeah,
walk.
they'll notice a mismatch. They're
Yep.
smarter than they let on.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I've learned a lot again from you, learn from you every time I interact. I'm so grateful for all the things that you shared with our audience that can go out and bless their lives. Hope everyone will pay attention to, especially your newest book coming out. We don't know when it'll come out, but it'll be for us, and so we're excited. And anything else, catch James at New Discourses. I think it's just newdiscourses.com, isn't it?
Yep.
And all kinds of resources. You're letting out podcasts like just all the time, and so many, the books, and I don't know what other events you do, but check him out, and we'll leave a bunch of links. Is there anything else? Is there other ways that I haven't mentioned that people can find you or engage with you or learn from you?
The people that want to find me on social media, it's a bit of a wild ride. I'm a wild creature on social media, but I get described at a talk one time as a knife fighter on social media.
If you want to watch the fight,
I try to be good, but I'm
lose your patience sometimes.
no, not so much patience. I have boundaries and I
Oh.
will give as I get. I know that the biblical thing is do not answer evil with evil, but bless. But man, there is nothing in there that says do not answer a smart ass with something smart ass. And so, unfortunately, it's a little wild. It's not for everybody's taste. I hope it's for yours, but I am at Conceptual James, which is also a spelling test, by the way. And I'm everywhere except Facebook. You can't find me on Facebook.
Okay.
Facebook banned me for life and has not unbanned me.
Oh,
And I didn't like it anyway, so that was great. I
yeah.
celebrated the day they kicked me off.
Okay. So at Conceptual James, we will link that as well. We'll link the website and the podcast and all the other resources. But it's been such a pleasure, such a treat. I just can't thank you enough. And thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next time.